on Wandering Monster, the Monster Manual of Podcasts. I am, of course, your host, John Baltusberger, not joined today by Charles Bernard and Lemons Clemens, instead joined by Small Child. She's fine, don't worry. So, if you would like to tweet out that people can find us at twitch.tv/kaijupoet, they can join us, ask questions in the chat, any of that. Otherwise, we're just going to go for it. Usually, I record this podcast right around 8:30 p.m. at night, which it's fairly late for you because you are across the pond. However, for me, it is a bright and early 2 p.m. So I'm full of energy and spunk and love for my daughter.
Also good.
Felix, first of all, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here.
I saw an ad for Wildsea on Facebook. And that's quite impressive because as a publisher who has spent upwards of $2,000 on Facebook ads, I've never seen them be effective before.
Yeah, it's been kind of a surprise to me too. This is all on the side of my publisher, Ray. He organized almost all the marketing around the Wildsea, and he's done a surprisingly good job.
Not surprising because Ray is some kind of horrible monster that's incapable of good decisions, but surprising for two reasons. A, marketing is incredibly difficult. And B, because specifically selling tabletop RPGs is not the easiest thing in the world. As amazing as the hobby is, the creative power, the art that people throw into it, it's still a niche category of hobby.
Yeah, and especially the kind of the area we're operating in, it's kind of a niche within a niche as well. Narrative-driven, exploratory-based games. It's it's not the most of our already small hobby.
So I want to. You are just going to be as weird as possible because we're online, aren't you? Why don't you play with your praying mantis? So, okay. I am long obsessed with two things in RPGs. The first thing I'm obsessed with is oceans. I am a huge fan of oceans and the sea. I like pirates and weird ocean stuff quite a lot. So Wildsea caught my eye immediately. Now, go ahead and spoil it. There's not a whole lot of ocean in Wildsea. No.
Well, I mean, it depends how you categorize ocean. If an ocean is something with multiple depths and many creatures, sunken treasures and ships and islands, then there's a lot of ocean. If you categorize ocean as a thing made of water, there is indeed very little ocean in the Wildsea.
But the other thing that I have long been obsessed with in RPGs is plant-based humanoids and plant-based monsters. I think they're cool. In fact, on this very podcast, I have numerous. Again, she's usually in bed when I'm recording this show. This is all new to her and very exciting.
You have your own plant-based monster right there. It's amazing.
I do. I've talked about myconoids, the mushroom men from D&D. I've talked about Biolante, my favorite kaiju, which is a mutated rose bush that got Godzilla's DNA. So I'm a big fan of plant-based monsters and characters. So I went to your Kickstarter page. I looked at the gorgeous art that you have there because it's beautiful, and started reading through the setting. And I really loved how unique this take on lore was. Because it's not something you see a lot of. You see I'm going to go ahead and call it a post-apocalyptic scenario, right?
Yeah,
I
that's
think
an entirely fair descriptor.
yeah. And but there's not, usually you see either Mad Max. Well, no, always you see a Mad Max scenario where life is difficult to exist at all. Whereas in Wildsea, again, not to give away everything, but it's almost the opposite. There's an explosion of life
Yeah.
that at the same time does make living more difficult.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's this kind of weird subgenre of post-apocalyptic media just grown up recently, where nature comes back and reclaims the world, but it's always after something else has done the damage. There are very few examples of nature itself being like or at least green style nature, being the overriding cause of an apocalypse. I mean, you might have Day of the Triffids, I guess, but even that was meteor/crashing satellite as part of it. I wanted to go for something where nature was like the root cause and the enduring effect of the apocalypse. So while the world itself was destroyed, there was no grace period. Like, people had to get used to living in this new forested ocean from day one.
What? Now, we very recently at Madness Heart Press released a post-apocalyptic book called Extinction Peak, in which dinosaurs floated out of sinkholes in the ground from the Hollow Earth and took to humanity that way. So I'm a fan of post-apocalyptic literature, and more so than that, I'm a fan of different takes on it. Which again, Wildsea immediately wet my whistle. I was immediately excited. Let's talk about the development of systems real quick. I have a little bit of game development education, let's say, from working with Brent Critchfield over at Studio Woe, and obviously I'm friend. If you're a listener of the show, I'm friends with the guys over at Shattered. So I see what goes into creating games, even if I'm incapable of it myself. When you create a narrative style, a game that focuses on narration, on story,
yeah,
I think the challenge must be figuring out where the interesting choices are going to be in the mechanics for players.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
How did you go about designing a system that would be interesting but not in the way of narration?
Well, that's a big question. You assume as part of this question that I have succeeded in doing this. I hope I have, but it's still up to interpretation.
I'm an optimist, Felix. I'm always an optimist.
I'm definitely not, but I can give it a go. For me, the main thing was I used to play a lot of Pathfinder, but I also used to play a lot of Call of Cthulhu with a flexible system. The problem with Call of Cthulhu, or at least back in the old, I haven't really dug into it the last 10 years, is that it was so flexible sometimes that it seemed like you could pretty much do anything. And I had a real middle ground growing up between the quite crunchy, there is always a good thing to do, like there is a best option play of something like Dungeons and Dragons, and the whatever you do is probably going to fail and you're going to go mad, or
right.
So when I in the Wildsea, I wanted to kind of hit somewhere in the middle of those two things, and it was a challenge at first because I'd never really played many other games, and I was living in a foreign country. I had a lot of time on my hands, and I started writing, and I made this horribly crunchy system, but tried to push in as many narrative elements as possible. Like, playing it was an absolute buster. And I went back to the drawing board, and as part of going back to the drawing board, I found Kickstarter, and the fact that in the years I've been away from the hobby, in this renaissance of like narrative driven, or at least more narrative focused games. And I found that a lot of the elements of kind of narrative play that I'd drawn from video games, like Sunless Sea, for example,
Sure.
with its kind of wonderful focus on storytelling, those narrative elements had already been added to the tabletop scene and had in fact existed since I started playing. I just never played. And I spent like a day going, oh, I guess I've failed. Like, I thought I was something novel and unique, and everyone's done it before me. But then after that day of like misery, I felt really good because it meant I was trying to hit something that people were going for. I was going into the right kind of headspace, I think. So I was thinking along the right kind of lines for mechanical narrative play. And then games like Blaze in the Dark in particular managed to marry my inspiration. And the system, the setting was already there, didn't need to be reworked, but the system got reworked very heavily, and we ended up with what we have now, which is something where you have many options from many sources, and there's not often like a best path. There's not always something best to do in the situation, but you have a lot of narrative options that can work well with other people at the table. That's what we've aimed for.
I find that systems that swing one way or the other too heavily are really frustrating for me. Case in point, there's a D&D game I played in where everyone was very heavy into theory crafting of the best combination of skills and feats, and as someone who never played that way, and as someone who like does all of this and has a publishing company and writes books and does, as someone whose life is chock full of stuff, I don't have time to theory craft. And so the game wasn't fun for me because I never knew what the right thing to do was. And I never put it in those words, but that's exactly the problem I was having.
And you're not thinking about the optimal experience.
And the other way is a system I dislike a lot, which is Fate. I'm a big opponent of the system, partially because it's so new user unfriendly. That all said, I think that there's a balance to be struck, where as you try to, I think Apocalypse World does it okay, building in these narrative choices that you can kind of say, okay, what I do is I say what I want to happen, or I say what I want my character to do, and then we figure out the mechanics.
Yeah, fiction first type stuff, I think, is definitely my favorite design space.
So I understand narrative playing. I understand narrative games quite well. I love them. What I also love but don't understand is explorative games. I understand them in theory. I understand them in video games. I understand them less when you are a tabletop player. Because either you need a dungeon master, a game leader, who is willing to build an entire world and has the resources and bandwidth to do that, and to set the little clues up and to connect the pieces, or it doesn't work as well. So how do you encourage exploration as a game theme in Wildsea?
We've kind of gone for what I hope is a third option. I mean, it could also be that it doesn't work as well. Who knows? But
hopefully the playtesters.
They seem to like it, but they could just be being really nice to me. Who knows? No, what we've gone for with the Wildsea is we've set up like the core parts of the world. Not in terms of places, but in terms of themes. The kind of elements that the world stands on. Big trees. It's a forest. You sail at sea. Certain bloodlines exist. Like, these things are all no matter really what kind of you're playing, no matter what the focus of the game is, these things. But then everything apart from that, until it gets down to the small stuff, we've just kind of we have mechanics that focus on allowing players to bring in truths about the world as they play. We encourage that kind of not quite free-form collaborative world building, but often in character world building or in situation world building. Because that way there's a very low barrier to entry. I mean, higher than if it was a settingless game or a game based purely on genre. But for a setting heavy game, which there's a surprisingly low barrier to entry to know those core concepts, and then your own character and everything. As the GM, it's a huge burden off you as well. You need to be good at reactive play, like listening to your players want with their characters, listening to the cues they give you. But you don't have to prep, and you don't have to world build beforehand. It should all come out as you play. And that's kind of where we keep our spirit of exploration. Not in exploring a huge predefined space, but in making that go. So it's just as new for the GM as it is for the players.
There's a game called Shards. It's full of anthropomorphic animals in a Far East setting, Indian, Chinese, Japanese. It's all influenced by the Asian mythologies and cultures. And I mention all of that to say the very best game of that I ran, I don't usually have that distraction. Usually by this point I'm mostly making genital jokes and talking about drugs, and that just isn't part of my life now. It's very weird trying to be charismatic without making dick jokes. But the very best game I ever ran of that, it was thrown in my at once. I was like, hey, are we playing this today? I was like, oh shit, I guess so. And we focused purely on interpersonal relationships between players and NPCs, and everyone had a blast. And ever since then, every game I run, I'm just trying to grasp back at that. But it's always interesting to see the balance we have as game runners between open-ended reactive play and improv, and trying to draw the players into a story that will really stick with them. And I find one of the best ways to draw players into a story and to really engage players is to have fascinating and engaging enemies and monsters. Which leads us to this evening, or morning, afternoon. I don't like the daylight.
It's evening for me.
Well, lovely. Evening for you. It's fine. It's fine. Look, London Long is in our room watching us if he wants to yell at me or yell about the bright sun my daughter is walking into. He or she can, or they. But let's talk about the ecology of Wildsea.
Yeah. What do you want to know?
I want to know everything. I want to know, first of all,
Take some time.
Wildsea is a fantasy setting. I think that's fair. Like it.
I would definitely hew at like weird fantasy rather than fantasy, but yeah, it's a fantasy setting.
I wouldn't call it high fantasy, but I would say.
Oh no, definitely no.
Oh, okay. So my for those of you who know me, this has been my book mail today. So I have a lot of reading to catch up on apparently. and one of these authors lives in my neighborhood, so he'll occasionally just circle around and throw a book on my porch. Um, so
Nice personalized book delivery. That's not bad.
yeah, unfortunately, occasionally I have to do the same for him. Um, so I maybe low fantasy, not so much focus on the high sorcery and magic stuff, but um, what I want to know, because I didn't get as far in my reading as I wanted to, is what was the world like before?
That's common for life these days.
What was the world like before? I keep wanting to say COVID, because that's all I can think about. But what was life like before the? And you have a great term for it. The Wildsea emerged. I'm trying to remember.
The verdancy.
Yes, the verdancy, which is brilliant. I love that. What was life like before the verdancy? Specifically, were these plant-based humanoids extant and well known before the verdancy?
So, a hard question to answer in a sense. What was the more plant-based humanoids, the ectus, which are cactus people, and the Gao, who are essentially mushroom people, did they exist before the verdancy? Yes. But the wider question of what was the world like before the verdancy, that is something that we don't really delve into, and that's on purpose.
Yeah.
We try to leave that history shrouded. So it's not that I don't want to tell you; it's that I literally can't. Because like what the pre-verdant world is like for me in my head, and how it comes into play in my table, is very, very different to what other GMs or fireflies, to use the Wildsea term, to what other fireflies do. For example, in some of my games, it's kind of taken as read that the pre-verdant world was this almost kind of Renaissance clock punky type of place. Huge areas of trade, decent communication system, but then in other games, abandoned high-tech weather towers and been kind of salvaged for bundles of wires and CRTs and things. It's very, very varied by design.
I find myself thinking of, I can't think of the name of the game now. The Horizon Zero Dawn.
Give me a general description.
Horizon Zero
yes,
Dawn.
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. There was a decent chunk of the setting and mechanics written whilst I was listening to the soundtrack of Horizon Zero Dawn. Great soundtrack, great game.
I understand that. I am writing a Celtic horror thing now, and I'm listening to Heilung. So it's all, I am also a person who has to have music that matches what I'm writing. And I always feel that authors that don't listen to music when writing might be psychopaths. Maybe? I don't know. Most of them are.
Try not to judge people's music choices or non-music choices while writing, but I will say, I do find writing without music to be a far less fun experience. In fact, my personal gauge for if writing is going well is if I put something on and then I realize after a while that the music has stopped because I've still been writing. And then you start it again and you try and repeat that process, getting to that zone of like, you're writing so much that everything is background.
Now, we mentioned yes, cactus people and mushroom people. Those are the reason I was interested in this game. That, like, as soon as those came into my periphery, I was like, nope, I'm there. I'm into it. What I want to know is how... Okay, I'm going to show you something, and maybe it'll explain something about me. I'm reaching over within arm's reach. I have this, my guide to mushrooms of North America, because I never know when I'm going to come across a mushroom, and I'm just going to need to eat it.
Yep, that's true. To be fair, all mushrooms are edible, but as someone once said, some mushrooms are only edible once.
I do like that. And then I have this also within reach of my desk. I am a big fan of mushrooms, and I live in Austin, Texas. Man, there was a day and age where you could say you were from Texas and people didn't scowl at you. That was before the days of George W. Bush. Before then, it was all Stevie Ray Vaughan and on the Lone Ranger. Now, good God. Anyway, so cactuses are literally everywhere here. Is there a forest or group of forests or fantasy forest that you based kind of the ecology of Wildsea on?
Not really. It's more based on a kind of real life place. I used to live right next to a very large forested mountainside, and a lot of my early Wildsea thoughts came while I was writing in a room that overlooked that forested mountainside out of window, and let me see the sea out of the other window. So just kind of blended together in my head after a while. But when it comes to like detailing new areas of the Wildsea, I tend to draw from a lot of real-world forests. Chance to.
And so I have to look back every once in a while to make sure my daughter is A, still there, B, still playing, and C, doesn't have any kind of weapon. Again, I do live in Texas. There could just be revolvers sitting around out there. They're discarded on the side of the road.
That's responsible parenting and good self-defense technique.
How do you, or not how do you? Oh, Lord. What did you look to when designing creatures from a narrative perspective? Were you looking to make things that were interesting? Were you trying to make them scary, intimidating, or were you trying to make them more believable towards the ecology and overall biosystem of the Wildsea?
It's kind of like a 75-25 split.
Okay.
Like, I normally start off with the idea of, like, what is one cool thing that a creature can do? Like, I don't think of the creature first, I think of the cool thing. And then from that point, I build outwards to the creature, and then as the creature takes shape, I try and work out where it would fit in the ecology and what that would mean for creatures around it. And so it's kind of that makes it sound a lot more grand than it is, because mostly it's just me lying in bed with a notepad going, what could hypnotize something? Could a flower hypnotize something? How would a flower hypnotize something? Like, it's not the most involved process in the world, but you know, there are steps to it.
I have all of those thoughts while walking around my my neighborhood. Not particularly about flowers hypnotizing people, but when I'm working out,
there's a lot of hypnotic flowers.
Yeah, all the time. Again, Biolante. In my new,
I've never visited Texas, so hey.
in my new book, where which is a Biolante erotica novel. No, who was the design artist? Who took these concepts and turned them into things that we could look at and admire, such as the small insect man smoking a hookah, in probably the most intimidating hookah smoking I've ever seen?
There have been a few.
Okay.
The first ever artist to work on the project properly was a guy called Killian Gia, and he is an amazing concept artist, and he has gone on to much bigger and better things than us now, which is really impressive. But he still keeps in touch and turns up in the Discord every now and then, which is lovely.
Lovely.
From there, we've been working with Pierre and Omoton, who are again, they are both turning up in our Discord every now and then. Gotta plug that Discord, that's good marketing. They both turn up in the Discord every now and then to share like work in progress or get opinions from people on things. Pierre was the landscape artist, and Umachon is the kind of character and certain other concepts artist. Very recently, we also brought in a new artist, Katie. She's been working on our monsters, and she's just come off a long hiatus, and we were really lucky to grab her, I think, and she's done some fantastic work. So it's kind of a combination of those four over time, because this book has been quite a while in the making. So it's changed since the early days.
So I'm looking through the book as we chat, and I noticed something I missed before. The little insect guy there. He is not a single entity. He is not a single little dude, and that makes me I gotta tell you, Felix, that makes me so happy. Let's see, Celicre? Or
we all say Chelicre with a hard ch, but technically it's Chelicre.
See, I'm using the Hebrew pronunciation because that's what I know.
You go for it. I mean,
little hive minds of spiders.
That's how it used to be.
It makes me so happy. Yeah. God, that makes me happy. I love swarms. Okay, I love swarms of things. First of all, second of all, I love swarms of things that take on a humanesque shape and like interact with the world around them. That's fucking good. It does make me curious about the hookah, though.
Sometimes you just want to experience a higher plane of consciousness, with a single mind or thousands of minds into.
I am terrified of what the mind expanded of a entire colony of spiders is. So, you mentioned that at the top of the book, these are the core four, the most likely to be encountered in the Wildsea. The other thing I want to mention real quick for anyone that is just kind of curious about the aesthetic, imagine a kind of Wild West meets Sky Pirates with lots of chainsaws, as far as the art that I've been looking at.
It's pretty fair rundown.
And look, if me saying Wild West Sky Pirates with chainsaws doesn't immediately make you run to Kickstarter and back this project, I don't know what to say. Like, you're obviously not a fan of mine if that doesn't get you riled up. What?
Well, if they want to get a better look at the system, the Quick Start PDF is entirely free as well.
Yeah.
We've tried to give away as much as possible, so they can pick it up from the Discord. There's links on there, from the website, from the Kickstarter page as well, I think. So, yeah.
And
even if you're not backing, like, you get enough material to run a game or a small campaign.
And I'm looking at I'm going off the Quick Start rules right now, because the first thing I did when I contacted you was pull up the Quick Start rules and look through them. Like I said, I didn't get as far as I wanted to. Like, this is the very first time I'm seeing the one-legged captain in a wheelchair with a peg crossbow leg and a witch hunter hat. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Are you, and I've talked about this on the show before, are you familiar with the Savage Avengers?
Nope.
It's a current line of comics featuring Conan the Barbarian, Venom, Doctor Strange, and Wolverine. Which is dumb. It's dumb.
Collection.
But it makes me so happy. I love ridiculous, impractical bullshit. It fills me with joy. And you know what? A peg leg crossbow is pretty impractical. But it's also amazing.
Yeah. I mean, to be concept of, like, chainsaw ships on a treetop sea, that's probably ridiculous, impractical bullshit, but it makes me happy too.
Yeah, no, and I was trying to explain 40K to someone not too long ago. And they're like, this all just sounds weird. And I was like, look, man, at the end of the day, you can either say, oh, this isn't believable and walk away, or you can get down with werewolf space Vikings who spit acid and eat rocks. Like, you have to make a choice, and like I definitely choose to suspend my disbelief in order for fun most of the time. There's a lot of I'm looking at the snapper pillar, which
Yes.
which is first line of the description of this monster is somewhere between crocodile and giant centipede. It's a first line, and then beneath that is like a man. How do I describe this thing? A ram, bulldog, shark, stingray. That's also a pufferfish, maybe. Oh, you're frozen, but you're smiling at me, so I feel I'm doing good.
Oh, yeah, that's good. You're also frozen for me, so.
Oh, lovely.
And give me a weird kind of side-eye look, so. Oh, now you're back. Okay.
Alright, lovely. Just so everyone knows, Felix, you are across the ocean in the UK, I assume.
Yep, there's almost as much distance as possible between us.
Yes. Which is why we're having some issues with pausing and buffering and all that. No worries. And as you've mentioned, you can get the quick start rules on Kickstarter. Quick start rules on Kickstarter right now. You can go. I set this up with Felix as quickly as possible because I wanted to let you guys know about it and get you in on supporting it as quickly as possible. Now this book has already been funded. You are in the clear. Wildsea is being made. So no one needs to worry about like, oh, I don't want to back something that's not going to get made. Although, hey, that's a weird idea because Kickstarter doesn't take your money until it funds fully. So there's really no danger when you're kickstarting something. Like, you're not going to lose your money if it doesn't get made. The worst that might happen is it gets, like, they decide to make it, or they get fully funded, and then they take years and years and years and years to make it. Paradise Lost.
Yeah, we're desperately trying to avoid that.
Yeah, no, but like you have art. It's clear that you have a little bit of layout going on here too. I don't know if you did the layout or if you hire someone to do layout.
No, I did the layout. It's just a matter of testing at some point. So.
Oh, you poor soul. Well, I a while back, a friend of mine in the industry, in the horror industry, Dark Alley, Lori Michelle, who does layout for almost all the independent horror publishers in Texas, was telling me their prices, and I was like, I would pay that simply to, like, my wife would pay you that simply not to have to be around me when I'm doing layout.
So, oh yeah, layout it's not my favorite part of the process, believe me.
It's
there's a reason one of our lowest stretch goals was to get a layout artist that isn't me. And it's not that I haven't learned a lot doing it. I've learned a lot doing it. It doesn't mean I'm good at it. I'm just functional.
Well, the quick start rules do look good though. They look very professional. They look great. And if that's a taste of things to come, I'm all for it. Okay, I do have a bone to pick with you though. Wasn't going to, but now I'm going to be angry. Okay. Your book is, what are the dimensions? It looks like it's going to be, I want to say, 8 by 5, maybe 12 by 5, 12 by 6. What do you got?
It's going to be landscape, but I don't know the dimensions. That is definitely the publisher's side of things. But
why is it going to be landscape? Look, it's beautiful. I'm happy. I'm going to get it. But landscape makes it a lot harder to fit on my shelves, Felix.
I know, I'm sorry, I know. And I could give you a lot of like kind of highfalutin reasons. I could try and talk about what a real kind of coffee table art book feel, which is true. But it's also more of like an outcome rather than an initial goal. The reason it started landscape is because my job, when we're not in the middle of a pandemic, is kind of roving English teacher. I move from country to country, place to place. I teach, I do stints in foreign countries, and that's my life. Mm-hmm. So most of the time, I can't take books around, and I can barely take a laptop around. I do almost all of my RPG reading through a tablet. And when
Okay.
using a tablet, that means that everything I've funded in the past 5 years is PDFs. And it is really annoying to read a portrait-style PDF from a tablet.
Okay. Nope. I understand what you're
So,
saying.
yeah.
Okay.
So like there's lots of good reasons we can say like after the fact of why it's landscape, but the earliest one for me is just that it's easy to read when you're doing it digitally. And
You know,
yeah.
that's not a terrible reason though. I was all ready to call bullshit, but frankly, I have a collection of probably close to a terabyte of RPG PDFs.
Yeah, so
And I have a shelf of physical books. So I definitely understand to get where you're coming from there. Um, all of this said, you've decided to go Kickstarter because you are paying artists. You're getting your own layout.
yep.
You're going to go hire a layout person, and all of that.
Thank
Especially
God,
the
yeah.
artist. Especially the artist cost so much money, and they're worth every penny. You just
Oh yeah.
uh,
We wouldn't be where we were today if I hadn't shelled out for art like other project. Like we just wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be talking. You wouldn't know what the Wildsea was.
no,
The
absolutely.
artists have added so much. Not even just to like the eventual look of the book. As I design, I try and get the art done in the earliest stages of designing something, so I can look at that art as a reference to keep me on track as I actually design the mechanics and stuff around it.
No, I've definitely designed book covers for ideas I had before starting writing,
Yeah.
so I definitely understand it. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about? Anything else you'd like to kind of make sure people know about Wildsea before we just direct them all to give all their money?
Um, I think okay. So the main one for me is even if you cannot fund it, you can still play it. Like we are in a weird time. I'm not going to give the whole spiel about uncertain times, etc., etc. We know what the world is like right now. It's not great.
We have an
I
election
have had
tomorrow.
Yeah, yes, that's a good
Like
point.
this okay, look, this goes live on the 9th. There may not be in America. I don't know yet. So we'll just see. We're gonna play this one by ear, actually.
Okay, well that's even more important then, because like I've gone through some periods of my life. I'm generally pretty lucky. I've gone through some periods where I have had to either fund things at like the hardship tier on Kick, just forgo funding something because I need to eat.
Yeah.
Like hasn't happened often, but it has happened, which is why we try to give like as much as possible in the playtest PDF. You can use the stuff that, to run a one-shot. You can use it to run a short campaign. It's not all the rules by a long shot, but it is a solid chunk of as much as we can give. And so even if you can't fund it, if you like the sound of it, pick up the Quick Start PDF, play some games with friends, and I am entirely happy. Like, that's cool by me.
Absolutely, and like I mentioned, not only has it already funded, a bunch of the stretch goals have been reached. Stretch goals that are going to give us more monsters, which is a big deal for me personally. Stretch goals that give more art. Stretch goals that improve the quality of the book or increase the content in the book. And so the more we are able to fund, again, it's definitely understandable. Definitely fine if you can't fund and you want to take that quick start rules, as Felix said. But if you can, the more that we can raise for this project, the more content we can get in there, and the cooler the end result will be. So keep that in mind. Felix, where can people find you and your project?
You can find links to the Quick Start PDF on the wildsea.co.uk, because I'm one of those British types. You can also find links to the Discord there too. You can find us on Kickstarter right now. Just search for the Wildsea or just Wildsea, either works. And at Mythopia, by Mythopia, who are an amazing company. And In fact, if I was going to tell one short story, it would be that the only reason Utopia is because I accidentally played a game for one of the founders of the company and didn't know who they were. One of the comics published a few years ago was a direct inspiration for stuff in the Wildsea. Cool. I played a game for this guy, Ray, good player. They stole some soup, they brined some ants, and then months later, wait, that's Ray. That's Ray from Mythopia. I've played a game with him, and yeah, now he's publishing us.
That's fantastic.
You can find us at the Mythopia website too.
Mythopia, okay.
You can also technically find us on Reddit, but we don't do much there. We mostly just pop up into worldbuilding and share art. So, you know.
Yeah, I eventually one day I'll hire someone to do Reddit for us, because I'm not going to do it. If you're looking for
That's how
me,
I feel about Instagram.
I can understand Instagram.
Oh, sorry. I'm so bad at this. That's the other thing. You can also find me personally and news about the project on Issacs _Fox on Twitter. But that is all very new for me, so I generally forget to say it. But
Twitter, I will say, Felix, Twitter is important. It is a huge marketing tool. Hey, I don't want to either, but we gotta. If you are looking for me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at Kaiju Poet. You can also find me on my website, www.kaijupoet.com, where I sell my books. I just got the proofs of my next book, War of Dictates, in the mail today, and it looks spectacular. That will be available on Amazon and through my website on November 15th. If you are looking for anything else, you can go to madnessheart.press, where you can find our books. You can including the new pre-sale for All Men Are Trash by Gina Rinaldi. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. Or if you want to get super angry about it and complain, because I would love to have published a banned book. All this aside, Felix, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
And to everyone out
loving
there,
this kind of interpretive Pan's Labyrinth dance as well.
For everyone out there, have fun. Play some Wildsea. You can do. Look, you have enough time that you can. You have enough time that you can go download the rules right now, check it out, play a quick game, and still back the project if you like it. Do it. And I will see you next week. Until then, stay safe, but stay scared. Oh, Lord Chad.